Welcome back to Tommy Codes. My name is Tommy, and in today's video, we're going to be going behind the curtain with ChatGPT. We're going to be understanding how it actually accumulates knowledge in the first place. We're going to look at some of the data sources that it was trained on. We're going to go over what causes it to hallucinate in the first place, and we're going to be doing all of this without any math or code whatsoever. If you've used ChatGPT, you'll be able to understand what I'm talking about here. You don't need a computer science background. You do not need a math background. And it should help you have a much better intuition for when ChatGPT and similar AI tools will help you and when they won't be able to help you. Let's go. Let's pretend you're a student in a history class in college. And let's pretend today is the final exam and you get the following question. Write an essay on the War of 1812. It's an exam. You don't get any internet. You don't get your phone. You definitely don't get AI. You don't get any notes. It's just you and a pencil and a paper. And let's say you write an essay that looks like this. Let's say you're a smart kid and you did a lot of research, you studied a lot, and you were able to write an essay that looks like this. This is how you start. The War of 1812, causes, battles, and consequences. This is your essay. And you get a good grade on this essay. Now, I want us to think about what would you have needed to do to prepare to actually write an essay like this in an exam setting where you don't get any notes, you don't get to look anything up, you just have to do it off the top of the head. What would you actually need to do to prepare? Let's say you started studying 6 weeks prior to the start of the exam. You're going to start studying, you know it's an American history class, so you broadly know the type of topics that might show up on the exam, but you don't know the exact questions. What you might want to do is do some research on the core concepts in the class. Let's say you know the War of 1812 is a core concept. So you go to Google. You go to Google and you just start reading stuff. You start reading about the Wikipedia page. You start reading, you go through the sections. Maybe you like it. You see stuff like the Royal Navy imposed an effective blockade on U.S. maritime trade, other interesting things. Maybe you read this article all the way through. Maybe you really like the Wikipedia article and you're a good student, so you want to do a thorough job with your research. You're not just going to read the Wikipedia article. You're also going to go to other sources. Maybe you go to the USS Constitution Museum. This source seems like it could be trustworthy. And maybe you read this entire article that they wrote here. And as you're going through Google, maybe there's sources that you discard because you don't think they're quality or you don't agree with them for whatever reason. Maybe this YouTube video you don't think is a good use of your time, so you don't read that. And as you do this, maybe you're keeping notes, maybe you're keeping track of all the stuff you've read, and maybe you particularly like some of the sources. Maybe this USS Constitution Museum you read not once, but maybe 3 or 4 times. And maybe each time you read it, you start to understand more and more. If you were to just read an article one time, you probably wouldn't be able to recite every single word of it or even retain 100% of the information. But as you read it more and more often, it's going to start to make like a lot more sense. And the information in the article is going to start to flow more naturally out of your head. And this is kind of the process that you need to do. And maybe you also have textbooks. So your teacher gives you textbooks and says, these are high quality sources. You definitely need to read them. Reread the sections that are most important. This is going to help you a lot on the exam. All of this reading and accumulating information is what you would need to do to have the answer, the ability to write an essay baked into you at exam time. And the way that AI models like ChatGPT accumulate this information is not that dissimilar from how you would accumulate information in this exam setting. The difference between you and ChatGPT, however, is that when you're in an American history class, you have a very narrow scope, or at least a much narrower scope than ChatGPT. I could have it write me an essay on anything. I could have it write me an essay on the 1908 World Series, which may or may not have been in your American history curriculum, but ChatGPT definitely knows this as well. And the difference between you and ChatGPT is you cannot just sit reading through Wikipedia all day, every day. You cannot just go on Google and read through every article on anything. ChatGPT actually can and more or less did. Now let's imagine the second question on the exam is the following. Write me an essay on the Civil War. And let's imagine you did a lot of studying. You did your research, but you only did your research on the War of 1812. You read nothing about the Civil War. You didn't attend the lectures when they were talking about the Civil War, and you just generally don't know that much about it. What is the likelihood that you're going to be able to get a good mark, a good grade on this question? Probably pretty low. Probably not very high, even if you're a really smart student. And a student that's maybe dumber than you in terms of IQ might do a much better job on this question if they did the reading and you didn't. And that's important to understand. These AI models as well, if they never read about something, if there's no information on the web about a particular topic, they're not going to be able to magically invent the right answer. They will, however, do something that you might do in an exam setting as well. Let's say you're actually, vaguely about the Civil War. You're on the exam. You don't have notes. You don't have internet. Again, it's just you and the pencil and paper. And you don't want to get a completely bad grade. You don't want to get an F and just leave it blank. So what do? You make some stuff up. You fill in the gaps. You decide to just wing it, basically. You don't want to sound unsure of yourself. So you just confidently write a wrong answer. You know it's wrong, but it sounds plausible and it's at least not complete nonsense. Maybe you'll get a D or a C, but you almost certainly will not get an A. And this is what we would call a hallucination. And these AI models, they kind of are like students in that regard because they'd rather try to get a good grade than admit they don't know something. Because if you just leave the answer blank, your grade's definitely going to be a 0. But if you make something up and talk about semi-related topics in a somewhat coherent way, maybe your teacher will feel bad enough for you and give you a D or a C- or something along those lines. That's very important to understand with these AI models. If they did not read something during training and you ask them a question about it, the chances that they'll be able to give you a quality answer are not particularly high. They will probably give you an answer, just like a student in an exam who doesn't know might make something up. ChatGPT will make something up because maybe it'll get partial credit, you'll smile, maybe you won't even notice. So in the case of our hypothetical history students, we have a pretty good idea of what types of questions he should be able to answer confidently and correctly, and which types of questions wouldn't really make sense. If in the syllabus we included events like the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, the War of 1812, then on an exam, it's reasonable to expect said student to understand these topics, to have read about these topics. ChatGPT could be thought of as a student in some respects. It reads a lot of information, but which topics are fair game for ChatGPT? Which things should it be able to answer well, and which things will it not be able to answer well? The answer depends on the data that it read. Just like our student, our hypothetical history student, read up a lot about the War of 1812, but didn't read anything about the Civil War, was able to answer correctly and confidently about the War of 1812, but wasn't able to give a good answer for the Civil War. ChatGPT will be able to give good answers for stuff it's read a lot about and will not be able to give good answers for stuff it didn't read about. It will probably just make stuff up, just like our student made stuff up for the Civil War essay that he didn't read things about. Unfortunately, we don't know what ChatGPT was trained on. We know some of the stuff it was trained on. We know, for instance, Reddit and Wikipedia are two very large sources of training data. And again, when I say sources of training data, you can think of that as ChatGPT sat down and read every Wikipedia article several times. It sat down and read every Reddit thread multiple times. That gives us some idea of which types of questions it would be able to answer. If you have a question that you want to ask ChatGPT, maybe just think to yourself, if I went on Wikipedia and looked for the answer, would I trust the answer? If you think yes, then ChatGPT will probably give you a good answer that you can trust. If you think no, if your intuition is telling you Wikipedia doesn't have good information or is missing information here, then ChatGPT might also not have the information. But unfortunately, it's not just Reddit, Wikipedia. There's also a lot of books that it's read, a lot of books you can find online that it was trained on, that it read multiple times, and just other random websites. There's also private data that OpenAI purchases to train the models on. It'd be really, really nice if this data was open source, or at least we got a more detailed breakdown of each word that it read, where it came from, and where the sources were. Because understanding the makeup of the data that it was trained on, understanding all of the books in the syllabus, so to speak, will really help us understand how to use ChatGPT more effectively. And again, this has nothing to do with the mathematics or the detailed machine learning stuff. This is really just the data. And anyone, you don't need a mathematics background. You don't need to know anything about machine learning to understand sources and research and all of these concepts. I really hope in the future, especially a company like OpenAI with open in the title would start to open source this stuff. I hope this becomes standard. And I think that's going to make things a lot better in general for AI. I think people are going to be more willing to trust it if they can think of it like a student who read materials from a syllabus, and they're going to understand when it's fair game to ask it a question and what it's actually knowledgeable about. I don't know if that's ever going to happen. I think there's some practical problems, but regardless, if you were able to see a list of everything it read, you would have a much better understanding of the model, maybe even than somebody who knows the mathematics well that didn't see that. the data is probably more important than the math. If the data is bad, no amount of math can fix you. You need good data to have a good model. If you made it this far, I want to say thank you for watching the video. Would really appreciate it if you could drop a like and hit the subscribe button. Have a great day.